You're listening to Merykid Explains, an oral history of one artist's discography featuring facts, feelings, and most importantly, context. Now, maybe you stumbled here by accident, or perhaps you're listening on some faraway planet in some distant time, vibing off an ancient method of communication. Or maybe, just maybe, you're one of the dozens of die-hard Merykid fans that actually finds value in this content. Regardless, feel free to sit back, get comfortable, and listen along to the gentle ramblings of a man and his memories. This is Merykid Explains. So, now we're in early to mid 2012, really exactly at the turning point from 2011 to 2012. The Great 85 ends in late November 2011. The best 2011 list comes out December of 2011, just wraps up the whole thing, puts the bow on the band, and it's over. So immediately I had achieved what I wanted in San Antonio at this point. I got the local album of the year. I had 2 radio shows now. San Antonio had invested in being a startup city for HD radio, which was supposed to, at the time, be a sort of competitor to Sirius. And whoever was in charge had reached out to me on behalf of my show on KRTU and loved the format so much that they basically offered me 2 hours on a Sunday nights, in order to do the exact same thing, but just do it on a HD broadcast and sort of be the inaugural kind of like mothership show for this channel. And that show ended up being called Good Job Texas, and that was a wild, wild time. And so what came with that was access. Now the radio show was being hosted inside a sort of Charlie's Chocolate Factory studio of sorts, which had a radio station. It had a full studio for photography. It had a room for video interviews, and then it had a full recording studio with like a jam room. Basically, at any point, and my friend, who was kind of the general operator and manager of the building, my friend had the keys to the kingdom. So basically, at this time, at any point of the day or night, I could just go to this place and do whatever I wanted. And this is where there was heavy opportunity for creation at this point. So I had achieved what I wanted in San Antonio. I had the album of the year, I had 2 radio shows, and all in all, culturally, I was highly connected to the city and the scene. Professionally, I was at my peak. But the Great 85, the way it fell apart, it, for lack of a better term, it just kind of broke my spirit. And kind of like with any breakup of any relationship, it reminded me of that, just sort of the fallout of it emotionally. And instead of taking the time to process what I was feeling or grieving, not just the band or my personal relationship to Diana, but just everything I had invested for years, half a decade of as Merykid and then the Great 85, just doubling down until the dealer takes it. And suddenly you're sitting there thinking, like, what have I done? What damage have I caused to my life by investing this much and going this heavy? You just keep thinking if you double down, it's going to eventually turn in your favor. And suddenly the Great 85 was just pulled out from under me, and I was kind of shell-shocked. Simultaneously, suddenly being presented with every opportunity I could possibly want. It really is probably a tale as old as time, right? It's kind of like an episode of The Twilight Zone, where I did anything and everything I could to get what I wanted, and exactly the moment I got what I wanted, I lost everything that made it matter. Good Job Texas, with having this new HD radio show. Again, it was based entirely around the format of me playing local unsigned Texas music. That's what it had evolved to. So I just had free reign to reach out to any unsigned band in Texas, no matter what they were doing or where they were, and bring them into the show. And everybody, it was a great opportunity. People loved it. Tons of bands wanted to be a part of it. We had a full team. And as I was pushing deeper into being, quote unquote, the local music guy, that's kind of what that's like what I was becoming. I was like again, like you think about everything that I've kind of covered in the previous episodes was this push and this drive to become the guy for San Antonio, the San Antonio guy. And in a lot of ways, that's what I had become. And I was falling less and less in love with local music as it was happening. Because really, I had seen too much. Like, I had gone into the underbelly of the local scene with the Grade 85. I had really just immersed myself in it. And I came back pretty broken up. I came back from war with a much different kind of like take on things. And so the Texas Weather was a psychedelic bluegrass band / collaboration with experimental soundscape artist Michael Randolph, aka Polysynth Fusion. Mike was an audio visual teacher at a local high school for years, and he was just like that teacher who stayed in touch with some of his more interesting students. Like, he sort of became a mentor for certain students that had potential, and outside of being a teacher, he just would become their friend. And when I met a certain group of core friends, like the guys that were just like my core group of people, the guys that were playing in my, they just happened to be talented musicians. They would play in my band. We would hang out. We would play video games together. Like, these were like my friends, my guys. Mike was just one of them. He was like a lumbering 6'7" giant man. And he had a wife, and he had kids, and he had a home in the suburbs, and he had an absolute fascination with modular synths. He didn't read music, he doesn't know how to play music, but he understood synthesis and like synth waves. He understood like the theremin and how to make sound out of it. And so the band, the Texas Weather, was cobbled together out of like experimentation at the forefront, right? Like, the whole thing was that I would play a song on the acoustic guitar, like I would play a folk song, and Randolph would be just like whirling and swirling away at a theremin behind me, creating like absolutely insane soundscape of noise. It was arguably the most radical thing that could possibly happen at any venue we showed up to play at. It was pretty wild. Some of it didn't always work. Like, imagine me playing a song in a key, and because Randolph didn't really understand music, he would do a whole thing in a different key, and like sometimes it just didn't work. But when it did, it was absolutely, it was something. And I really think it was it was really punk rock in its purest form. Like, they're saying you're punk rock and then like playing punk rock, which is really adhering to the rules of what the idea of punk rock is. But then there's like this, which was like we would show up and we would dare the listener to sit through this like half hour of insanity. And in my opinion, that's a lot. That's the most punk rock thing you can do. It's not about the Green Day aesthetic of power chords and oi, oi, right? It's about breaking rules. It's about reforming rules, daring people to pay attention to what you're doing. And the Texas Weather would show up and just do the last thing that you could possibly imagine that we would do. The Texas Weather, we took every opportunity that the Great 85 had been offered. Like local showcases, like local record labels wanted to like work with us. South by Southwest appearances, opening for major touring acts. Like all of these things were being offered to me as the guy from the Great 85, without really knowing what was going on. It was just reaching out and being like, hey, we've got this. What do you got? And I'd say like, okay, well, I don't have this, but I have this. And more often than not, we were being brought in. So the Texas Weather completely benefited from the hard work of the Great 85. I don't know how else to say it, but that was what was happening. There were no rules to any of our shows. Like we never practiced. We just gave zero fucks. I think we had one ritual was just to like drink whiskey before the show. Like we'd have one shot of whiskey at a bar before we would play a show. It was never the same show. It was never even the same sound. He was just creating the absolute most insane noise, and I would just play whatever songs I wanted. I had so many songs at this point. I could play anything. You could be hearing an all-folk version of The Raccoon. You could be hearing Great 85 songs. You could be hearing really deep-cut Merykid songs. You could be hearing covers. You could be hearing anything. And then on top of it, insanity from the theremin. We were just whatever we were in that moment. It was very present. It was very enjoyable. And in fact, like if I had to summarize, it was basically a victory lap of sorts. After the previous 5 years of just backbreaking attempts to find my place in the scene, right? Suddenly here we were, and it was all just there. I figured it all out. I did the work. I got the opportunities, and the Texas Weather is the vehicle that we drove the little victory lap around in. In 2012, I had basically grown beyond being a musician. I was like more so a presence, maybe even like a personality. And it almost felt more like I was a politician than anything else. If I was being written about in the paper now, it was just like based on like Nick Mary. It wasn't Merykid, it wasn't the Great 85, it wasn't anything. It was Nick Mary is doing this. I was asked to make appearances, and like I had fans, and I even had a stalker at one point, which was, it is what it was. What, you've never had a stalker? What are you doing with your life? You never had a stalker before? I did. Instagram had started in 2012, I think, 2011, 2012. Social media was kind of just a full-on part of society now. It had all gotten to a place where you were always posting about something. It was the big three: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. And yeah, I had a stalker. I had a guy who just every now and then would send me a message and just be like, saw you eating here today. And I was like, what the fuck? He's like, I saw you at that pizza place today. I'd be like, oh my God, who are you? I had fought for a seat at the table in San Antonio's art scene, and in 2012, the seat was there for the taking. At least that's how it looked on the outside. Because on the inside, I was basically broken. The Great 85 and the battles being fought, in my mind and body during that time had drained me completely of any enthusiasm or desire. Like I was completely burnt out. And my sort of starry-eyed vision of San Antonio had been completely erased and replaced by like a checked-out like a autopilot version of me. Like I was showing up, I would play the shows, but like I was not there emotionally. The Texas Weather was an extension of the work I had done. It was like a savings account I was suddenly ready to spend. And like looking back, I really could not have had a better bandmate to invest that time in. Like Randolph was super creative and very motivated and very talented and very easy to get along with. And throughout our time together, you know, he was just as much of a rock star and had just as much of a presence as Diana ever had in his own way, really. Like, people flocked to him after our shows as well. Like, they were mesmerized by the wizardry of his theremin. I used to joke with him that he had groupies at every show, only instead of, like, beautiful women, they were dudes in their 50s and 60s who were, like, equally enthusiastic about modular synthesis. Like, imagine... imagine we're playing our shows and, like, people were coming up to the stage to watch us. Like, they would leave their seats to come to watch us. And it was always these, like, middle-aged, balding dudes with ponytails, with, like, Pink Floyd t-shirts, and just mesmerized by Mike and what he was doing. It did bring me a lot of joy. It was really fun. He hates that. he hates bringing that up, or like the fact that I would tease him about it. But that's what it was like, man. It was really cool. It was like we were connecting with people. The Texas Weather had something, just like any other successful art or extension of art. The Texas Weather had something that made people interested and excited. It was very cool. It was very interesting. We were very unique, and it was very easy, and I was miserable. It was more or less like dating someone new, like immediately after a serious breakup. You know, it's like no matter how amazing that new person is, I was not emotionally ready for it. So the Texas Weather, it didn't last long, but we did manage to release an EP. We managed to play at South by Southwest. We opened for several high-profile touring acts, the biggest one being Nico Case. And ultimately, you know, left a small window to return again someday. We still talk about it. It was 10 years ago, and every now and then him and I casually text each other, just like, are we coming back yet? And, you know, it's usually him saying yes and me just, like, changing the subject. But also, the Texas Weather is probably my favorite band name I've ever been a part of. That's for sure. I think that's an absolute perfect summary of the wild energy that we brought. Just as wild as the weather of Texas. Unpredictable. So without further ado, here are the tracks off of our EP, The Fall, The Winter. It starts with The Fall. So this is a 5-track EP. We had a good friend, his name is Damien. Damien was the in-house engineer for that studio, the one that housed the radio station and the photo studio and all those other things. Damien was the guy who was the engineer in the actual recording studio. So I think through the connection of Randolph, became friends with him, and then we somehow finagled an opportunity. He just asked if we wanted to track an EP. So we went to Damien's studio and we put this thing together, and it's just like this weird little art piece. 5 tracks. It starts with spoken word poetry by Randolph called The Fall. And his voice is like deep and booming, and it's all these swirly musical things behind him. And it goes on. It's 2.5 minutes long, just like spoken word poetry. And then it goes into Melted Gold, which is a 4.5 minute folk song with Randolph playing behind it. And I'm playing guitar. I'm playing the banjo. I'm playing the whatever that drum is. It's like a box that you kind of like sit on and you like, tap it with your hands between your legs or whatever. Cajunte or something like that. That's probably wrong. But one of the, like a box drum and a couple other things. And then, a big part of the record too was we were trying to put in as much ambient sound as possible. So you've got my guitar, the way I cut the strings after I'd strung it, it's got these really wild extended strings in the tuning heads. And so what you're hearing as I'm playing guitar is you're hearing the strings like rustling and just kind of the steel hitting each other. And so I thought the song was pretty good. I actually really liked it a lot. I liked it a lot. I think the story of the lyrics can just tells a pretty good narrative. My heart is like melted gold, easy to look at, but the hardest thing to hold. I always really liked some of the lines in this song for sure. Proud of this one. One of the coolest and like one of our tricks in this song is that there's a moment in like the chorus or so where Randolph times his hand to the theremin where it makes this huge thunder sound. And when we would pull it off live, I mean, I think one time like we just like shut the electricity off. I think like we overloaded the circuitry of like a venue we were playing at because it's like such a huge amount of sound happening. And so when you listen to it, there are these moments where it sounds, you can hear like a thunderous boom, and it's like, that's not a sample of thunder. That's like Randolph playing an instrument with his hands and like, manipulating radio waves to make thunder. He just knew how to do that. He was a wizard. And yeah, so Melted Gold, more so along the Merykid-esque folk sound, but just like way, way darker and weirder. Track number 3, All Out Freak Out. All Out Freak Out, we wrote this in the studio. This is the weirdest of all the weird things I've done. I've done a lot of weird songs. This is the weirdest one. All Out Freak Out, just in the name. It is it's a 5-minute freak jazz instrumental jam. I wrote the drum beat in Damien's studio on the keyboard. He like sampled up some drums, and I just wrote this beat in 20 seconds. And then Randolph is doing his swirly wizardry theremin, and I'm playing the trombone, and I'm playing an instrument. The lead instrument is it's a recorder, like a kid's instrument, like a kid's toy recorder, but it's made out of bamboo, and it's got an actual reed, like a tenor sax reed in it. So it's an instrument I found called the Xaphoon. It's spelled Xaphoon. It's like a recorder, but in a real one that has the ability to like bend sound because it's got a bamboo reed in it. So what you're hearing me play, it's not like a clarinet, it's like a Xaphoon. And I'm just going wild on this thing, man. When I listen to that, I'm like, how? Like, who's that playing? But it's me, just whiling away on this Xaphoon. I wrote a little thing in the key and just am going wild. I mean, if you listen to this, it is so freaking weird and cool. It's very out there. It's very cool. And then here's something that's funny. So at the end of this song, there's a voicemail. There's like an audio sound of like a woman, and she's leaving a voicemail. And the voicemail, if I remember correctly, it's something to the tune of like, "Hey, I just wanted you to know that I heard you the other night, and I love it. I think the sound you're doing is so much better. I'm just really proud of you. Okay, bye." That was a voicemail left on my phone by a woman. Her name, I don't remember her name. It starts with a J. She was a local blogger in San Antonio who, in 2011, saw the Great 85 play a show, and then after the show sent me a message on Facebook, like a private message, and basically said, "Your band is horrible and you're ruining the city." Those were the words that this blog, like a member of San Antonio's media, someone someone who like had sort of built up this blog to cover San Antonio's music scene, reached out to me to say, "You're ruining the city," which was kind of like in line with the energy that I had been creating around me in the later stages of the Great 85. That's like the type of shit I would get from people. And you know, it's funny, like that particular interaction is something that I've held on to, and I saved it and I shared it at the time, and it every now and then Facebook shows you memories, and every year it like shows up again, like her saying like, I just want you to know that I think you're ruining the city, your band is terrible. And I'm kind of responding, and my response to her is basically like, yo dude, you're clearly drunk, and like you're messaging a stranger. I just think you know, I just don't think this is the move. And her being like, whatever, I don't care, I it's just really important to me to let you know I think that your your band is bad, and like you're hurting the city. Just like, and again, and you know, my response is very dismissive, and it's just kind of like, yo, you're a hater. I said that. I'm like, you know, unfortunately, you're what we call a hater, and you know, I'm glad that you care this much, and I think it's great that you like have such a strong emotional connection to these bands and like the shows, but yeah, I couldn't care less, you know, that, and that was it, or at least those were the parts that I like copied and pasted. Uh, well, hey, wouldn't you know it? Only a couple months later, she heard me probably on I think the Texas Weather played somewhere, and she had somehow gotten my phone number, and she called and left that voicemail. That is the same person who told me I was ruining the city. That's a person calling me, leaving the voicemail saying, I heard what you're doing. I think it's great. She's like super positive about it. And without her permission, I put that in the song because, you know, I don't want to say it. I don't want to say fuck you. I don't want to. I mean, I want to, but like, you know, like in 2012 that was a fuck you. In 2022, you know, my soul doesn't need that kind of weight on it. So it's like, hey, wherever you are, I appreciate the phone call, and you know, you're, for better or worse, you've been a kind of like a part of my musical history because you're in one of my songs. So All Out Freak Out, a complete just explosion of creativity. Could never play that song the same way twice, and I would never want to. Track number 4, Someday. I think that Someday might be one of the best songs I've ever written. This recording is pretty good, and it kind of captured like the sort of pop. I remember we had submitted it to some website, another website that did like peer-to-peer reviews, and we got a bunch of reviews on this one that was just like, really loved the sort of underwater pop song sound. You know, Mike's doing these really cool beeps and bloops with the theremin, and I'm playing like it's got a really nice, you know, I had written a kind of like drum beat to it, and it's a lot of falsetto. It's very Gautier, Somebody I Used to Know. That song came out, I think, like at the time it was like out. This kind of had a similar vibe to that. It has my favorite, if not my favorite line, it's like one of my favorite lines I've ever written, which is I know that it's late, but I was hoping we could talk. I know that it's late, but I was hoping we could talk. Like, I freaking love that line. I love that line. I love those words. I think it invokes such a really just like identifiable emotion of hoping that it's not too late to get someone on the phone because you're feeling anxious. Can't wait for the morning. I am already leaving this place. If my words aren't enough to awake you before the morning sun, well, I pray that I will see you again someday. Yeah, man, I like that song. I really do. I'm glad and that was actually a song that I had been kicking around for a while. And I'm glad that I'm glad I was able to actually get it on record, and like that it came out in this package, like with the Texas Weather. I think that's like the 4th time that I've tried to say the Texas Weather, and I've started to say the Great 85. I mean, we're talking within emotionally like these. The Texas Weather was an extension of the Great 85. It was like the coattail end of it. And then so after Someday, it's just another spoken word ending the winter. It's like the bookend of this record. 4 minutes, 13 seconds, another swirly theremin jaunt and Randolph's booming voice doing some more spoken word. And so you've got 5 tracks: spoken word, folk song, hugely freakish jazz jam, another kind of like quiet indie electronic song, and then spoken word. And that's the EP. We released it in a DVD case. The cover, I was in Arizona with my girlfriend at the time. We were visiting her family, and I had to make an album cover and send it to Mike, who, this was like, I think it was like a day or two before the CD release show. And so I went to the store and I bought construction paper and I made this cover. It's like a purple and blue tree. Looks like it's on fire. And then you've got a couple of sheets which look like sun, maybe like sun rays or something. Construction paper and time crunch, baby. That's what creativity is. You know, Jack White taught us that. Like, if Jack White's guitar is 6 steps away, he wants to be 7 steps away from it just to force him to do something, right? So, like, when I had just a little bit of time, I had construction paper, I had an idea, and I took that picture with my iPhone, and I like it. I do like it a lot, the cover of this project. And that was the EP. Again, all in all, the Texas Weather was a great outlet for creativity. It was cool, it was fun, it was easy. You know, the difference between playing a show in another city and having to scrap gas money and like driving all night, as opposed to like driving in Mike's like luxury minivan. It was basically, it was almost like a spaceship. It was so comfortable. Like, that was just the perfect the perfect kind of like imagery of what the Texas Weather was. It was luxury, it was comfortable, it was so easy. And I was not happy. And so after a while, I think it just kind of fizzled out. I think I fizzled out. You know. After a while, after the CD was released, yeah, there wasn't too much more I felt like I had to accomplish, and it went on its way. Again, Mike has still gone on. Mike's still a huge presence in the art scene locally. Polysynth Fusion actually opened for Neon Indian at one point. So technically, he's gone on to have an even better career than really I ever did. I mean, that, you know, he's a rock star. People love him. I love him. And we are not saying just yet that the Texas Weather are finished. In fact, you just never know. An interesting thing that happened in this time period, 2 interesting interactions. If you recall, I had been given, for the Grade 85, we had been given the Best Local Album award or honor, right? But this was coming from a newspaper who had sort of almost confidently established that they were not fans of me. I think that me winning that award or being granted that honor was a happy accident. It was something that snuck underneath the editor, under his nose, to where he didn't quite know. He gave a lot of freedom to the writer, is how it was explained to me, and then before it was too late, it came out. He then released his own list with the words, no, actually, this is the best one. I don't care what any other list says. This is actually, you know, imagine an op-ed with the words opinion in it, identifiable by the word opinion, stating his opinion like a fact. It just kind of explained the kind of guy he was. So, in March of 2012, this paper did their annual Best of San Antonio. You know, again, like, have another one. This is a different kind of. This is like, I think these are called the Indie Awards or something like that. Favorites, favorite restaurant, favorite this, favorite local band, favorite blah blah blah. One of the categories that they put out was most overrated artist of San Antonio. Now, when I found this out, and I remember we were at the studio. It was after one of the radio shows. I was kind of sitting around the group of people involved with the show. Randolph was there. I remember it was announced that was a category, and we were all kind of taken aback by it, because in a world where we're trying to connect and build our community and, support a sort of like positive mindset, this was completely the opposite of that. This was giving an opportunity for people to vote in order to tear down a band. Like, this was giving people an opportunity to hurt some band's feelings. And it bothered me. It bothered all of us in the room. We were all a little shook on that. And in that room, I'll never forget it. In that room, in that night, I decided that I was going to run for it. And I was going to win. And I was going to take it so that nobody else could win. Because what was going to happen was some poor band, and I had my theories on which bands. There were very well-known bands that people did not like. But I had theories on who it was going to go to. But regardless, like, some poor band was going to be named the most overrated band in San Antonio. And you have to think, like, if they were just trying to get some sort of happiness by expressing their art, to be called out like that in a forum as public as this, like the actual Indie Awards of San Antonio, it was just cool. It was cruel. It was cruel. One of the really, like, a new. I stopped being surprised at the low points. Like, I stopped being surprised at how low this local paper would go. I should have stopped being surprised when they made a public statement about, why would anybody want to listen to this kid about my music? In 2009, by 2012, they were giving out awards. They were bullies. That's what they were. They were bullies. They were just abusing their place, and it was like they had become a bunch. I don't even know how to describe it. It wasn't right. Nobody liked it. Nobody was happy about it, and at least in my circle. And so it was decided, like, I was going to run for it, and run for it I did. Immediately out of the gate, I put out this a kind of like press release. I made a huge announcement. I'm running for most overrated. Vote Merykid, most overrated. I got all my friends involved. I reached out to all the people that were kind of casually, around, friends, other, like, people in the scene, and I asked them to post it too. And it became this kind of, like, it was almost like a meme. It was a widespread campaign for Merykid to win most overrated artist. I took professional photos with a sign that said, rate this. And it's ridiculous. I'm like holding a banjo, and I'm dressed like Johnny Depp in Benny and June, or whatever that movie was, where he's like a whimsical video clerk or whatever. The one with the top hat and the vest. Oh, you mean every Johnny Depp? The one where he wears a weird hat and acts weird? Yeah, every Johnny Depp movie. But yeah, I really went full force, and this was like March of 2012 when the awards came out. And lo and behold, that editor, the guy who took so many personal shots, the guy that had gone out of his way to make sure that, previous positive reviews of my work didn't get published, et cetera, et cetera. Well, one day I get a message from him, and he's like, dude, I just think that what you're doing is great. It's so funny. We're going to make sure you win. And so we're going to set up every winner got an interview. Like, they had to sit down with a reporter and kind of get, give a little take on the winning their award. And he was like, so just do me a favor, when we give you the award and you give your interview, just really play it up, like just really, just, you know what to do, but just, play along with it. And in my mind, I'm just like, man, fuck you, dude. He didn't even understand that, like, I took it so that some other band wouldn't be hurt. He didn't understand that this was done almost in a way to say, like, you're just an asshole, me to the paper. I don't even know what he thought. Or who knows what he thought. But I win the award. They make the award, they announce all the winners. I win the award. And the bands that came, and like, again, like, such assholes. Like, they announced the second and third place. And they're like, one of them is like Girl in a Coma. I think Girl in a Coma, who weren't even in San Antonio anymore. They had been signed to like Joan Jett's record label, and they had just, left and were on tour a lot. And they got second place, which means that if I hadn't done it, they would have been voted first, which again didn't make sense. It was like they were the only band that had like ever been signed out of San Antonio, and they were the ones that would have gotten the most votes because they were just the most well-known band. And I'm pretty sure even they released a statement about it that was just like, why? Why was this a thing? Why was this an option to vote for this? I win the award. I do the interview. And I'll never forget sitting down. I'm sitting outside. I'm at some bar. I don't remember. And I'm sitting with this girl. She's like the reporter from the paper. And we're kind of... Basically, the entire conversation that I'm having is explaining to them. Like, I feel like this is my moment. I get to take my moment to be like, this is really fucked up that you guys offered this. I campaigned for this because I was trying to protect the other bands in town. I think it was really hurtful. I think you guys did a disservice to, like, the community. Like, I really went in. And this is what they wrote. I've got the paper right here. I saved it. Let's see. Nick Merykid, the one guy from the Great 85, whatever name you know him by, has been voted the most overrated musician in San Antonio. Laugh all you want, but this is exactly what Mary wanted. And the joke is, apparently, on us. As if on cue, speakers at the bar where Mary and I are talking start piping out Carly Simon's "You're So Vain," and it's all too appropriate. Mary seems to notice. Quote, I can't say that I'm not vain in the sense that this entire campaign was to prove a point about myself and my own self-worth. And it goes on like this. But the line about, like, Carly Simon's "You're So Vain," that was the takeaway. Apparently me telling them, that what they were doing was wrong was not interesting. It wasn't as interesting as the writer making that quip. You're so vain. Touche to the writer. Kelsey Valadez. That's the name. I ran into Kelsey years later. And I brought up this article, and I was like, you guys, I mean, was that really worth, you really had to take that shot? And she goes, I was really proud of myself as a writer. I thought that was pretty clever. Putting Carly Simon's "You're So Vain" started playing, and it couldn't have been more appropriate. Just directing it to being about my ego, the award win, not anything else, not anything else. So touche. She got what she wanted. The paper got what they were gonna do. I shouldn't have. Again, I'm not surprised. It was what it was. And hey, maybe. And as a self-aware human, maybe it was entirely a self-gratification ego trip. Maybe I was completely blind to who I was and how people saw me and just like how I was acting. That is so possible, especially now when I think back on it. Maybe I was just like this out-of-control ego monster who was just taking every opportunity to get more and more attention. And if that's the way that this paper saw it, that's fine. But I didn't create that fucking award. I just want it, okay? I just want it. So they give me the award. That comes out. The Texas Weather is still doing their thing. I played ball. I didn't take it any further than that. I didn't. Oh, and at the same time, the radio show, Good Job Texas, won Best Radio Show. So, like, I went to this thing and walked out with, like, several awards. Their award show or whatever. So, fast forward to the Texas Weather EP release, and I reach out to this editor, sort of an olive branch. It's the first time that I've ever spoken to this, like, that I've ever reached out to this guy. And I say, hey, look. And again, this is right after this guy thinks that him and I were in on some joke, that the most overrated thing was like some great joke that him and I pulled off together. Not me just completely disgusted with him and his choices as an editor. But I reached out to him and I said, look, our album's coming out. It'd be great if we could get a review. If not, that's fine. I don't know how it works. But if there's a chance, that's cool. I'd really appreciate it. And his response to me was, it was very professional. It was very, seemingly kind. It was like, hey, look, I would love to. We usually need a little bit more time. I think the show at this point was like 2 weeks away. He was like, we would just need a little bit more time. Unfortunately, like, we just can't really, like, take something last minute. No offense. It's not personal. And I believed him, and I understood it. I'd worked with a publicist before. I knew how this worked. And I just said, hey, you know what? I appreciate that. I appreciate you telling me. No harm. Thank you. Well, wouldn't you know it? I go on Twitter, like, seconds later, as one does, just, like, shift from one social media outlet to another. And a guy that I'm following, just some local musician, has retweeted, in that second, in that moment, he has retweeted something that the editor went on Twitter immediately after our response and said. And I shit you not that the editor had gone onto Twitter and he had written to nobody, but he had written this. Just because you and your shitty band have a shitty album coming out, don't think you can fucking throw it at me in the last moment. That's all it said. 2 seconds after I had that conversation with him. He just... And so I did probably the stupidest, but, hey, you be the judge. So I go back to Facebook. I go back to the messages that him and I had just exchanged. And I write, listen, if you ever call me out like that again publicly, I will destroy you. It's like what I said. I was so mad. And I'm like, now I have full on threatened the editor of this paper. Years worth of abuse from this paper finally culminated in this. I said, if you ever call me out like that publicly again, I will destroy you. I have multiple radio shows. I am so involved in this city. I have so much power if I want to turn people against you. I will destroy you. I was so mad. It came out. I'm trying to think of, like, I wish there was some movie I could think of that, take any movie where the protagonist has finally been pushed too far. It was like Gohan watching Cell step on Android 16's head. Just a line. It's like flashed before my eyes. And I just went Super Saiyan 2 on this message. And I threatened this dude. And I told him I would destroy him. I was like, what? What was I saying? I don't know. It was very illegal. It had to have been illegal, of course. Harassment. Among other things. And 2 things came of that threat. Immediately, he blocks me on Facebook. Immediately, I'm blocked. And then 2 weeks later, the paper comes out, and there's a review for the Texas Weather's EP. 4 out of 4 stars. And there it was. David finally topples Goliath. I took on, for the first time in a long overdue, I took on this stupid-ass paper, and I took on the city of San Antonio. I took on the culture, the zeitgeist, the aura, this thing that had so clearly evaded me and moved in a direction that I wasn't moving in. I took on this thing that I had wanted and didn't know how to get it. It never appreciated me. I never understood it. And in that moment, I just punched it right in the face. And it worked. And it worked. And that was it for me. Really. That was the beginning of the end. Months, you know, well, we did the CD release and then, you know, played a couple more shows and the summer hit and, you know, months went by and I stopped thinking about music. And I stopped thinking about all. I let it all go. And I started I got a job. I started saving money. I started planning on, you know, I was 26. I was 27. I wasn't having fun playing music anymore. And I just started thinking about the next steps in my life. And I started thinking about who I was outside of music. And I stepped away from it. And I kind of went radio silent. I stopped doing all the radio. I stopped doing the radio shows. I just walked away. I walked away from it all. And a couple months later, I remember sitting on the floor of my room, and I'm watching TV. And imagine my surprise when I get a text message. And the message says, "This is Carlton Zeus. We need to talk."